Welcome back to History Otherwise, where we explore the paths not taken in history.
It's good to be back. And today we're standing right at the edge of a precipice.
That sounds dramatic.
It is. The date is the 8th of May, 1657. We're in the banqueting house in Whitehall, London. And the question hanging in the air is, well, it's perhaps the most significant what if in the whole of British history.
And looking at the sources we've got for this deep dive, this isn't just about one man deciding to wear a crown. This is the moment history forks.
It absolutely is a fork in the road between, well, the world we know and a very different, very orderly and profoundly unfree Britain.
We're talking about Oliver Cromwell, the man who killed a king, being offered the crown himself.
And in our timeline today, unlike in the history books, he says yes.
Which is a huge turning point. So before we get into King Oliver, give us the roadmap. How are we tackling this?
I think it's best to break it down into three parts. First, we really have to get inside Cromwell's head. Why does he accept, and what is the immediate fallout? Second, we'll look at the brutal mechanics of it, how this new dynasty secures its power, especially against its own army.
Which was the most radical, politically motivated army in history. No small task.
No. And then finally, we'll project forward the long-term consequences. A Britain without a glorious revolution, a state-run industrial revolution, and, well, a modern state that looks more like a machine than a society.
Okay, so let's set that scene. May 8th. What's actually happening? I see this phrase in the sources everywhere. The humble petition and advice.
Right. So you have to understand, England is absolutely exhausted. They've lived through years of civil war, they've executed King Charles I, and now they're being ruled by these figures called the major generals.
A military government, basically.
A military dictatorship, yes.
Yeah.
It was efficient, but it was hated. It felt like an occupation in your own country. So Parliament, ironically, wants a king back. They want stability.
And that's where the petition comes in.
Exactly. And here's the key legal point. Parliament argues that Cromwell's current title, Lord Protector, is, it's vague. It's defined only by the sword. But the title of king, well, that's defined by centuries of English law.
That is a fantastic paradox. They want to make him king, not to give him more power, but to limit him.
Yeah.
To bind him with law.
That was the gamble.
Mm.
Now, in our history, Cromwell agonized over this. For 6 weeks, he paced the halls, he prayed.
And he refused?
Famously. He told them, I would not build Jericho again. He felt providence, God's will had smashed the monarchy, and to rebuild it would be a terrible sin.
But not today. In our deep dive, the pragmatist wins out over the preacher.
He does. He looks at the chaos, at the failing military rule, and he realizes that the good old cause he fought for is dying. If he wants it to survive, he has to weave it into the fabric of the state. It needs the legitimacy of a crown.
So he stands up. The sources say he looked tired, worn out, an old soldier.
He clears that famous raspy throat of his, and he says yes. He tells them, if Parliament judges that this title alone can bring peace, I cannot refuse.
You can just imagine the air in that room.
It would have been electric. A heartbeat of stunned silence, and then I imagine a roar of relief from the politicians and the merchants, cries of, God save King Oliver I.
The lawyers are happy. The businessmen in London are thrilled. Stability.
But, and this is the crucial point, that room is not unanimous. The soldiers are there.
The army.
The army. You have to remember, the new model army wasn't just, a bunch of grunts. It was a political movement. It was a religious congregation on the march. They fought to destroy the office of king.
And now their general, their Moses, has just accepted it.
It's the ultimate betrayal. To them, he's not a stabilizer. He's a sellout. He's an apostate.
Worse than that, surely, for the real radicals, the fifth monarchists.
To them, he is now quite literally the Antichrist, the man paving the way for the beast. So while the city celebrates, the army mess halls are filled with a cold, silent fury.
Which leads us straight into part 2, the price of the crown. Because you can't just do this and expect your top generals, men like John Lambert, to just salute and go along with it.
John Lambert is the absolute key figure here. In real history, he was Cromwell's deputy, the heir apparent, but he was a Republican to his very bones. The second Cromwell says yes, that relationship is over. It's ash.
So what's the first move? Does Oliver try to win them over?
He tries, but he realizes very quickly it's impossible. And this is where King Oliver has to do what Protector Oliver never could. To be a king, he has to stop being a revolutionary. He needs an army loyal to the crown, not to the cause.
He needs a purge.
A ruthless one, a kind of 17th century Knight of the Long Knives. He strips Lambert of all his commissions immediately. He has the most outspoken Republican officers arrested.
But hold on, how does he actually get away with that? If the whole army is against the idea, why don't they just, overthrow him then and there?
That's the cynical genius of Cromwell. He understood the difference between the radical officers and the common soldiers.
What's the difference?
The officers care about Republican ideology. The common soldier cares about getting paid.
And the crown now has Parliament's money.
Bingo. The petition came with funding. King Oliver pays the army its arrears, months of back pay they were owed in gold coin, on one condition, a new oath of loyalty to the crown.
He bribes them.
He buys the loyalty of the rank and file and isolates the leadership. It is a huge gamble. There are mutinies, skirmishes, but he has George Monk.
The ultimate professional soldier.
Monk values order above all else. With Monk enforcing discipline, the political back of the new model army is broken. It's transformed from a body of saints into a professional standing army.
And that single act changes everything that comes next. Because in real history, when Cromwell dies in 1658, his son Richard, well, he fails spectacularly.
Tumble-down Dick, they called him. A bit unfair. Richard fell because the army grandees, like Fleetwood, just walked all over him. He had no power of his own.
But in this timeline, his father already took them off the board.
Exactly. The grandees are in prison or exile or just gone. The army is loyal. So when Oliver dies on that auspicious date, September 3rd, 1658, the succession isn't a crisis. It's a coronation.
King Richard IV.
It sounds so strange to say, doesn't it? And here's the real twist. He's actually a good king. They call him Gentle Richard. He's a civilian, not a general. He governs through Parliament. The whole country really breathes a sigh of relief.
The dynasty is secure, which means the Stuarts, Charles II and all that.
The Restoration is canceled. Charles Stuart dies a bitter exile in France. And the great powers of Europe, they're pragmatists. Louis XIV sees the Cromwell dynasty as stable, so he recognizes it. The Stuart cause is abandoned.
So no Jacobites.
They become a fringe group, maybe called Stuartists, whispering in taverns. But the biggest consequence, the one that truly rewrites the DNA of the Western world, is what doesn't happen in 1688.
The Glorious Revolution.
Correct. And we have to pause here because this is so fundamental. In our world, 1688 is when Parliament invites William of Orange to depose James II. It's the event that gives us the Bill of Rights.
It establishes that Parliament is supreme over the king.
It's the bedrock of modern liberty in Britain and, by extension, in America. But if you have a stable Protestant King Richard V on the throne,
you don't need a revolution. You never get a Bill of Rights.
You never get that moment where the rights of the individual are legally placed above the power of the state.
So what does politics even look like? If it's not king versus Parliament, what's the debate about?
The debate becomes state security versus individual conscience. And the state almost always wins. And you have to remember Cromwell's spy master, John Thurlow.
A terrifyingly effective man.
He basically invented the modern intelligence service.
Right.
In our timeline, his network was dismantled at the Restoration. Here, it becomes a permanent arm of the state, a ministry of state security.
So instead of the vibrant, chaotic 18th century we know, the coffee houses, the satire you get,
you get a silent London. It's pious, it's industrious, it's safe. The Royal Society still exists, but they're not debating abstract philosophy. They're developing better metallurgy for cannons, better ballistics, science in the service of the state.
It sounds so cold, efficient.
And that's the perfect word because it leads us to the Industrial Revolution. In our world, that was a messy, chaotic process driven by entrepreneurs. In the Cromwellian timeline, it's the industrial crown.
The government directs it.
From the top down.
Yeah.
The state sees very early, maybe the 1780s, that factories, canals, coal mines, these are strategic military assets. So you get planned industrial towns.
With workers living in barracks.
Waking up to a bugle, not a factory whistle. Dissent isn't tolerated. A strike isn't just a labor dispute. It's sedition against the Commonwealth. It's a rebellion against God's order.
And we have to touch on Ireland. Cromwell's legacy there is, well, it's horrific in any timeline.
It's sustained, yes. But here it becomes permanent policy. Ireland isn't a sister kingdom. It's a managed resource, a colony.
The sources use the chilling phrase, a prison and a farm.
That's it. The population is kept down through forced conscription into the imperial armies, through resettlement.
So the Great Famine of the 1840s doesn't happen.
No. But only because the population was never allowed to grow large enough to be so vulnerable. It's the darkest of trade-offs. No famine, but at the cost of total liberty.
So if we fast forward, You have this militaristic, hyper-industrial Britain. What happens when you hit the 20th century?
In 1914, you have King Josiah I on the throne.
King Josiah, very Old Testament.
It fits the brand perfectly. And when the Great War comes, this Britain doesn't enter it reluctantly. It enters it as a righteous crusade. The entire state is a war machine, and a very powerful one.
So the war is shorter.
Much.
Yeah.
They are brutally effective. But that victory just sets the stage for a very different and perhaps even scarier Cold War.
Against two.
The Soviet Union still rises,
Yeah.
but think of the ideological clash. In our history, it was democracy versus communism. Here, it's the Cromwellian Commonwealth faith in God against the Soviet Union faith in man.
Two totalitarian systems, both absolutely certain they have the ultimate truth.
Exactly. And that brings us to the present day in this timeline. A 21st century London that is clean, orderly, technologically advanced. The trains run on time. There is no crime.
Yeah.
But there's no satire, no
Yeah.
dissent. Parliament exists, but it's a rubber stamp for the King's Council. It is a society that traded all of its freedom for security.
It's fascinating. One of our sources mentions that Voltaire, the great French philosopher, actually admired this version of Britain.
He did, but not for its freedom. He admired its order, its ability to get things done. And that's the seductive trap of it all, isn't it? We look at the gridlock of our own systems and we wish someone would just fix it.
And this timeline shows a government that just fixes it.
But the cost is everything we value. The price is your own voice.
It really reframes the Glorious Revolution. We learn it as a date, 1688. But you're saying without that messy, complicated event, the entire liberal world, it just doesn't happen.
We assumed democracy was inevitable, like gravity. This deep dive shows it was an accident, a fluke. By saying yes, by filling what someone called the king-shaped hole in the Constitution with his own powerful dynasty, Cromwell would have closed the door on liberty.
He creates a state that's too stable, too strong to be challenged.
And there's the terrible irony. In our history, his refusal, his moment of conscience, led to chaos. That chaos led to the Restoration, which then failed, which led to the Bill of Rights. Liberty grew out of his failure.
Whereas in this world, his success
Strangles liberty in the crib.
So looking back at that moment in the banqueting house, the lawyers were right, the title of king brought order, but the soldiers were also right, it was a betrayal.
They were both right, and that's the tragedy of it. Cromwell wanted a nation that was both godly and free. In our history, he failed to build a state that could last. In this one, he builds one that lasts forever, but at the cost of freedom.
It is truly staggering to think that one man's decision in one room could change the course of everything from the rights of man to the Cold War.
It shows you how history really can hang by a single thread.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the king who never was, what's the final thought you want to leave our listeners with?
I think it comes down to a really uncomfortable question we should ask ourselves. We live in a messy, chaotic world. We often crave order, a strong hand. This timeline forces us to ask, what is the true cost of order? And is it a price we are ever willing to pay?
A massive question to end on. That's all for this deep dive. Thanks for listening to History Otherwise.
Subscribe for more explorations of the paths not taken, because history might have turned otherwise.